I was fascinated by kind of the blank slate you walked into this offseason, because outside of maybe Miles and Denzel and a couple other younger pillar players, you guys had a lot of flexibility and kind of a blank slate to work with. So when you're thinking about stacking priorities and how you want to build a defense, what does that hierarchy look like as you start the process this offseason?
Yeah, so I think one, it's something that's not just done in a vacuum. Like, you have to do that hand in hand with like your coaches and your scouts, right? A big influence is ultimately how Kevin and Joe Woods, how they want to play on that side of the ball. Our defensive system has a lot of flexibility that's built into it, but it also does have some call it pillar principles. And then I think the second piece becomes like, okay, here are the skill sets by position that we value or that we think will make the biggest impact. What also is available to you in the player pool? Because the reality of it is every team only has so many what I would call Superman positions, where you have that unicorn who can kind of do everything. There are only a handful of those players that exist. So with the rest of the player population, like, what skills are available and can you actually find and be in position to acquire, and how can all that come together to marry with your offensive or defensive system to ultimately produce wins. So it really starts with a discussion with your coaching staff, and that's something that we did really, I guess, 18 months ago. And then it really transitions to your personnel group with what's available. And it really is, I guess, maybe constant dialogue back and forth, because there does have to be give and take really on both sides of it, both what we're aiming for, and then realistically, do those aiming points need to change based on what's available.
So I'm curious, when you're thinking about like the secondary, for example, are there specific roles that you're trying to fill, or are you thinking about depth as a less concrete idea where it's like, we need more talent in this position group? Or are you thinking this player fills X spot and now we have this flexibility with all 5 of these guys on the field at the same time? How much specificity is there as you build the position groups individually?
It's a combination of both. Like, you probably start with both, hey, here's the baseline level of talent that we need, and here's how we would like that talent to produce, because this is the style of defense that we want to play. The reality is at all spots, you're never going to get both. So at that point, then maybe it changes, like, okay, really, how important is just overall talent at this position versus how important is the role to make the rest of the system work?
Totally.
Yeah.
And then, because it seems like every single guy that you guys took, whether it's Troy Hill now, having a fourth corner allows you to play more 4 corners at the same time, having another linebacker or what JOK is, you can do certain things in different packages. So it allows you there's flexibility there. You can push further in multiple directions. Do you feel like that sort of depth and versatility on the back end is more of a priority now in team building than it's probably ever been?
Football really is a war of attrition, and you do need it's both a war of attrition and the fact that you can only dress now 48, but it used to be 46 men up on game day. Like, you really do need people who can do multiple things in case you get into a tough spot. Not to mention, to your point that I think you were kind of leading to earlier, it is a matchup league, right? And how you may match up against Baltimore versus Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati, may be a lot different week to week to week, and you hopefully have the personnel to be able to stay within the pillar principles of your system, but be flexible enough to accommodate the strengths and weaknesses.
That's what's interesting, is that there's depth obviously stacked up. It's like you have more corners, you have more safeties, but you can also just go horizontally. You can go more different places with just the personnel packages you can use now, which I think is one of the coolest parts about watching you build this unit individually. So you guys obviously, a lot of secondary players, John Johnson, Troy Hill, Greg Newsome. In a vacuum, but you gave Miles that extension last year. In a vacuum, right now in 2021, would you say it's better to be stronger up front or on the back end?
I don't think it's an either or proposition.
Okay. All right.
I think you see a lot of, quite honestly, a lot of top units that can do either or. And actually, probably maybe the 2 best examples might be, in the AFC North. Like, I think Pittsburgh has the best front in all of football. They gave the whole league fits last year with their ability to really control the line of scrimmage. I think you look at Baltimore, they had one of the best secondaries in football last year. And that's not taking anything away from their front, but the fact that they were really able to smother, perimeter players week in, week out made them effective.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously the two sides work together. Mm-hmm. Baltimore, it seems like they're on one side of the extreme that they've always been, because they play a lot more man coverage. I think that's also plays into it, right? It depends on stylistically what you want to be on defense, and that probably is going to inform how you want to build, obviously. So when you got here, though, you guys poured a lot of money into the offense and resources, period. Drafting Jedrick and the Conga contract, Austin Hooper. And I believe, looking at the numbers today, you have about 65.6% of your 2021 cap devoted to offense, which is the highest mark in the league. And even after some of the spending you've done, you're 30th in defensive spending. Would you say it's fair in a vacuum to say that you want to be a team that is up there in offensive spending and builds offense first and is an offense-centric team?
I think it's fair to say that, we've always said that we believe the quarterback's the most important position in football, and we want to make sure that we have an environment that's conducive for that player, that position group, producing at a high level, because that's how we believe you have sustained success in the NFL. I think in terms of maybe drilling down another level in terms of spending on side of the ball, I think at times, sometimes those analysis are they're not really capturing the whole picture, because so many people use, let's say, cash spending or cap dollars as like a measure of importance, which obviously
priorities,
it does, right? It does have, but it ignores the fact that like you only have so many premium resources in an off season, and some of those premium resources are quite honestly like high draft picks, but because those players are on rookie deals, their weighting probably isn't as appropriately captured if you look at it from a pure cash or cap perspective.
Can we go the other way, though, and say because Baker's currently on his rookie deal, the fact that you've spent so much on offense is an indication the other way, that your quarterback is still relatively cheap and you're still leading the league in offensive spending?
I mean, you can draw whatever conclusions you like to, Robert, but I would tell you, I don't think that quite tells the whole story. But yeah, certainly we want to support the quarterback, and certainly we want to have strong offensive play.
So you guys finished, I think, 8th in weighted offensive DVOA last season. And the performances in the second half of the season are very good. And I probably have as much faith as anyone in Kevin and those guys to get the most out of that group moving forward. But I think you probably know very well that improvement and linear improvement, especially on that side of the ball, is not a given. It never is. Regression is real, especially for teams that make a huge jump from one year to the next like you guys did. Is there a little bit of anxiety on your part going into this offseason with relatively the same group of players on that side of the ball after all the additions you made last year?
I'm always anxious about our team. It doesn't matter.
Question.
It doesn't matter
I gave you that one.
What the offseason is. Look, I've said this before. Like, no team that you design does everything always go 100% according to plan. And at this point, I feel like I've been in the NFL long enough where you realize just how hard it is to win games on a weekly and certainly a yearly basis. And it's a very, very humbling profession. So we certainly have, a lot of optimism and belief with the players that we've brought in and how hard the guys have worked so far in the off season. But our focus is really on controlling what we can control on a daily basis. Once we do get to the end of the season, we'll be where we want to be in all three phases.
Do you feel like, looking at not only the improvement you would hope for in year 2 of the system with Baker, but just bringing Odell back, adding Anthony Schwartz, it's almost like these little tiny tweaks that make it feel like a different offense? Is that kind of what you were thinking about it? Where even if the majority of the players are the same and the DNA is the same, we feel like we've diversified the skills enough where we can be hopeful about some growth in the second year.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we always want to evolve and improve in areas where we can from year to year. I don't think that's I don't think that statement is out of bounds, but I don't know that feeling this year is different than any other year.